Picture a family dinner table in one of the most opulent mansions in London. Crystal chandeliers illuminate gold-trimmed walls adorned with priceless art. Servants in formal attire move silently between courses. But there's something peculiar about this dinner. An extra place has been set at the head of the table, an empty chair that no one dares occupy. According to eyewitnesses prominent enough to have visited British Rothschild homes, this seat is reserved for someone very specific. Not a late-arriving family member, not an honored guest. This place is set for Satan himself. The Rothschilds, you see, don't just worship wealth and power. They worship something far darker. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about the world's financial system, about the nature of generational wealth, and about the hidden hand that has shaped global events for the past 2.5 centuries. This isn't a story about simple banking success. This is an investigation into how one family used occult practices, satanic rituals, and secret society networks to accumulate an estimated 50% of the world's wealth. The Rothschild name appears in hushed tones in the halls of power. Presidents defer to them. Prime ministers consult them. Central banks move at their command. Yet most Americans couldn't tell you anything substantial about how this family achieved such unprecedented control. That's by design. Secrecy has always been their greatest weapon. We're going to follow the money. We're going to decode the symbols. We're going to expose the networks. And we're going to trace the bloodline back to its origins in the ghetto of Frankfurt, Germany, where a man named Meyer Amschel Bauer made a choice that would alter the course of human history. The red hexagram hanging outside his door wasn't just a business sign. It was a declaration of allegiance to forces that most people don't believe exist. Frankfurt's Jewish ghetto in the mid-1700s was a place of crushing poverty and rigid restrictions. Jews were confined to a single street. They couldn't own land. They faced crippling taxes and humiliating regulations. Most families scraped by through small trade or money lending at local levels. But Meyer Amschel Bauer was different. Born in 1744, he understood something that others didn't. Power doesn't come from following rules. Power comes from understanding the hidden systems that control those who make the rules. His father, Moses Amschel Bauer, had run a small counting house and money-lending operation. The family business was unremarkable, except for one detail that has been documented by multiple historians. Hanging outside their home was a red hexagram, not a gold coin, not a traditional Jewish symbol. A red six-pointed star that had nothing to do with Judaism and everything to do with something else entirely. The hexagram, also known as the Seal of Solomon, had been used throughout the Middle Ages by Arab magicians, Kabbalist magicians, Druid witches, and Satanists. This wasn't ancient Jewish religious symbolism. In fact, the six-pointed star wasn't considered a Jewish symbol at all until the Rothschilds made it one. One of the few ancient uses of the symbol was found on the floor of a 1,200-year-old Muslim mosque where Tel Aviv stands today. In the 12th century, an Ashkenazi Jew named Menahem ben Duji, who believed he was the Messiah, used this magical symbol. But it remained obscure in Jewish circles. The Rothschilds adopted it specifically because of its occult power. Because they were Satanists, They chose this symbol for their coat of arms in 1822. The name Rothschild itself comes from this red hexagram. In the 17th century, when Meyer Amschel Bauer began hanging the red shield outside the family house to identify it, he made a calculated decision. He would take a new name, Red Shield in German, Rothschild. The family wasn't named after a profession or a place. They were named after a satanic symbol. Young Meyer showed exceptional intelligence and cunning. He was sent to study to become a rabbi. But the death of his parents when he was 12 changed everything. He went to work at the banking house of Oppenheimer in Hanover. There he learned the mechanics of banking, but more importantly, he learned how to move in the circles of power. The Oppenheimer family was already deeply connected to Illuminati networks and early satanic banking operations. Gumpel Oppenheim was in the inner circle of the Bund der Gerechten, the League of the Just, an Illuminati front run mainly by Jews who practiced Satanism. This organization, financed in part by early Rothschild money, would later pay the Satanist and Mason Karl Marx to write the Communist Manifesto. Heinrich Oppenheim masterminded the Communist Revolution of 1848 in Germany. Meyer Amschel absorbed everything. He understood that the real power didn't flow from kings and princes. It flowed through the bankers who financed them. Kings came and went. Dynasties rose and fell. But the money men remained. They were the constant in every equation of power. By 1764, Meyer returned to Frankfurt and took over his father's business. But he had bigger plans. He cultivated a relationship with General von Estorff, helping him with coin collecting, a passion among the nobility. This connection led him to Prince William of Hanau, one of the wealthiest royals in Europe. Prince William was in the business of renting Hessian mercenaries to other nations. When the British needed soldiers to fight the American Revolution, they came to Prince William. The prince made a fortune in blood money, and Meyer Amschel Rothschild managed much of that fortune. Here's where the official history and the hidden history diverge. The standard narrative says Rothschild was simply a skilled banker who earned the prince's trust through competent service. The documented reality tells a different story. Meyer Amschel was initiated into Freemasonry and deeper occult circles. He understood the hidden hand signs, the ritual practices, the secret oaths that bound the elite together. The Rothschilds played a major role in the Bavarian Illuminati from its founding in 1776. At least one of Meyer Amschel's sons was a confirmed member. The Illuminati wasn't just some intellectual society discussing Enlightenment philosophy. It was a structured occult organization dedicated to infiltrating and controlling existing power structures through secrecy, symbolism, and systematic deception. Meyer Amschel had 5 sons and 5 daughters, but it was his sons who would execute the greatest financial coup in history. Their names were Amschel Meyer, Salomon Meyer, Nathan Meyer, Kalman Meyer, later called Karl, and Jakob Meyer, later called James. Each son was trained not just in banking, but in the deeper arts, the occult knowledge, the hidden networks, the real source of their power. The strategy Meyer Amschel devised was brilliant in its simplicity. He would place each son in a major European capital. Together, they would form an intelligence network and banking empire that no single government could challenge. They would finance all sides of conflicts. They would control the flow of gold and information. They would become indispensable to kings while remaining answerable to no one. Amschel Meyer stayed in Frankfurt to manage the original operations. Salomon Meyer went to Vienna. Nathan Meyer went to London. Karl Meyer went to Naples. James Meyer went to Paris. Each established the principal banking house in their respective city. Each cultivated relationships with the ruling elite. Each married within carefully selected families to preserve the bloodline and expand the network. The marriages were strategic, almost clinical. The Rothschilds practiced intense intermarriage to keep the wealth and occult knowledge within the family. Cousins married cousins. Uncles married nieces. The bloodline had to remain pure. The secrets had to stay in the family. This wasn't unusual for elite families, but the Rothschilds took it to an extreme that raised eyebrows even among European aristocracy. Meyer Amschel's will contained a clause labeled Number 15. This clause has been kept secret. There's no public record of what it actually said. Some claimed it required his descendants to remain true to Orthodox Judaism, but the Rothschilds haven't remained true to Orthodox faith. They've moved freely between religious identities while maintaining their core occult practices. Something else is in that clause. Something the family doesn't want known. The Jewish world has praised the Rothschilds extensively, calling them the true kings of Judah, the princes of captivity, the Messiah so long looked for. One contemporary account stated that the Rothschilds governed the Christian world, that not a cabinet moved without their advice, that they stretched their hand with equal ease from Petersburg to Vienna, from Vienna to Paris, from Paris to London, from London to Washington. That Baron Rothschild, head of the house, possessed more real force than David and more wisdom than Solomon. But this praise came with a price. The Rothschilds helped the Jewish people in their own way. For those who admire stinginess, the Rothschilds were exemplary. The extent of James Rothschild's charity in France to poor Jews was 5 francs, equivalent to $1. Their dynasty destroyed honest Jews along with Christians. They crushed competition regardless of religious affiliation. Money was their god. Power was their religion. And Satanism was their practice. The real fortune began during the Napoleonic Wars. This is where official history tells you the Rothschilds made their money through clever bond trading and superior information networks. That's partially true, but it leaves out the occult timing, the deliberate manipulation, and the blood magic that the family believed gave them supernatural advantage. Nathan Rothschild in London had established himself at New Court in St. Swithin's Lane. He was the most aggressive and ruthless of the brothers. He understood that war was the greatest opportunity for profit that banking could offer. Governments needed massive loans to field armies. Winners needed money to rebuild. Losers needed money to pay reparations. Either way, bankers won. But Nathan did something that went far beyond simple war profiteering. He created a private intelligence network using Jewish merchants and agents across Europe. These couriers moved faster than government messengers. They used coded language. They operated in secret. The Rothschild network knew about military victories and defeats before the generals who fought the battles could send word to their own capitals. The famous story about Waterloo has been told many times, but few understand its true significance. In June of 1815, Napoleon faced the Duke of Wellington in Belgium. The outcome of this battle would determine the future of Europe. Nathan Rothschild had agents on the battlefield. He knew the result before anyone in London. The standard story says Nathan used this information to buy British bonds at depressed prices, knowing they would soar when news of Wellington's victory arrived. He made a fortune. But this version sanitizes what actually happened. Nathan Rothschild deliberately spread false information first. He appeared at the stock exchange looking grim. He began selling British bonds. Other traders panicked, assuming Napoleon had won. The market crashed. Then, at the perfect moment, Rothschild agents bought everything at catastrophic lows. When the real news arrived the next day that Wellington had won, the bonds skyrocketed. Nathan Rothschild multiplied his fortune many times over in a single day. But more importantly, he demonstrated absolute control over the British financial system. From that moment forward, the British government understood who really held power. This wasn't just insider trading. This was systematic psychological warfare, combined with information control and perfect timing. The Rothschilds believed their occult practices gave them supernatural insight into timing. They held rituals around financial decisions. They consulted astrological charts. They believed in the power of blood sacrifice to strengthen their position. The large amounts of voluminous correspondence by Rothschild couriers attracted attention from governments. The sheer volume of secret communication raised suspicions. But no one ever successfully stopped their personal intelligence and mail services. Governments that tried found themselves financially dependent on Rothschild loans. Critics mysteriously faced ruin or worse. After the Napoleonic Wars, the Rothschilds financed the reconstruction of Europe. They didn't just loan money to winners. They financed everyone: the German states, the Austrian Empire, the Italian kingdoms, the restored French monarchy. Every major government became dependent on Rothschild credit. This gave them leverage that went far beyond simple banking relationships. They could demand policy changes. They could influence the selection of ministers. They could push for wars or prevent them based on their financial interests. The official history calls this influence. The hidden history calls it control. Governments borrowed money they could never fully repay. Interest compounded. Dependency grew. The Rothschilds tightened their grip with each passing year. By the 1820s, the family had become the most powerful force in European finance. They weren't just rich. They operated their own geopolitical strategy that often superseded the interests of the nations where they lived. They were truly international, truly rootless, truly accountable only to themselves and their occult practices. The shift to satanic worship from any pretense of Orthodox Judaism was complete by this generation. Meyer Amschel's sons openly participated in Freemasonic lodges and deeper occult circles. The documentary evidence is extensive. James Rothschild in Paris was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason. Nathan Rothschild in London was a member of the Lodge of Emulation. The Masonic reference book, 10,000 Famous Freemasons, confirms their membership. But Freemasonry was just the outer layer. The real power operated through organizations that most Masons knew nothing about. After the Bavarian Illuminati were exposed in 1786, the central occult power over European secret societies shifted to Carbonarism, also known as the Alta Vendita. This organization was led by Karl Rothschild, son of Meyer Amschel. In 1818, Karl participated in creating a secret document sent to the headquarters of Masonry from the Alta Vendita. The Masons were extremely distressed when a copy was lost and offered rewards for its return. It was originally written in Italian. The title translates to Permanent Instructions, or Practical Code of Rules, Guide for the Heads of the Highest Grades of Masonry. This document revealed the long-term strategy for infiltrating the Catholic Church, corrupting education systems, and gradually subverting Christian civilization from within. It wasn't about immediate revolution. It was about patient, systematic corruption across generations. Plant the ideas, control the institutions, wait for the harvest. This was the Rothschild approach to power. Play the long game. Think in centuries, not years. The wealth accumulation during this period was staggering. Historians estimate that by the mid-1800s, the Rothschilds controlled more liquid wealth than all the royal families of Europe combined. Not land, which could be confiscated, not armies, which could be defeated, but liquid capital that moved across borders, that could be hidden, that could be deployed instantly wherever opportunity or crisis presented itself. They financed the industrialization of Europe. Railways, mines, factories. Every major project required capital. The Rothschilds provided it, always with strings attached, always with the expectation of control. They didn't just want returns on investment. They wanted ownership of the means of production. They wanted board seats. They wanted influence over every major corporation. The symbol they chose for their coat of arms in 1822 was no accident. The red hexagram, the seal of Solomon, appeared on all official documents. It marked their properties. It identified their businesses. This satanic symbol became synonymous with Rothschild power. When they later helped establish the modern state of Israel, it was entirely appropriate that this occult symbol became the flag of that nation. Not the menorah, not the tablets of Moses, but the hexagram that the Rothschilds had used for centuries. The ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel understand this. They refuse to serve in the Israeli army because they know that Almighty God was not behind the creation of modern Israel. Rather, it was the rich, ungodly, apostate Jews with their occult practices and satanic allegiances who created the state. These Orthodox Jews are wiser than Christians like Jerry Falwell, who run around proclaiming Israel is God's nation. They understand the difference between the children of Abraham and the children of Satan, who claim Jewish heritage. The Rothschild initiation into higher degrees of occult power wasn't a single event. It was a generational process. Each son underwent rituals that bound them to forces beyond human understanding. Each generation passed down knowledge that couldn't be written in ledgers or recorded in official documents. The Masonic lodges provided the outer structure. 33rd degree Scottish Rite gave them access to the aristocracy and political elite. But the real power came from organizations that operated behind even those veils. The Prieurs de Sion, also known as the Elders of Sion, related directly to the Rothschilds, who reportedly served on a Jewish council of Elders of Sion. This wasn't some romantic mystery from Dan Brown novels. This was documented connection to occult power structures that stretched back to the Knights Templar and beyond. The Rothschilds understood that true power required supernatural alignment. They didn't just believe in these forces. They actively courted them through ritual, through sacrifice, through the deliberate inversion of everything sacred. The Kaiser of Germany seems to have understood what he was dealing with when he said the magic powers of money, as wielded by the Lord of Lucre, are powers of black magic at its blackest. This wasn't metaphorical language. This was recognition of what the Rothschilds actually practiced. By the mid-1800s, the Rothschild network had expanded beyond Europe. They set their sights on the greatest prize of all, the United States of America, a nation founded on principles of independence, suspicious of central banking, hostile to foreign financial control. The Rothschilds had been thwarted twice before. Thomas Jefferson fought against Alexander Hamilton's scheme for the First Bank of the United States, backed by James Rothschild. President Andrew Jackson successfully warred against the Second Bank of the United States, where Nicholas Biddle acted as agent for James Rothschild of Paris. But the Rothschilds were patient. They played the long game. They would wait until the right moment, create the right crisis, and install their system permanently. The key was finding the right agents in America, men who understood the game, men who could be trusted, men who were already part of the network. The Morgan family became the primary American agent for Rothschild interests. J.P. Morgan's father, Junius Spencer Morgan, had established the relationship in London. The Morgans weren't just business partners. They were extensions of the Rothschild will in America. Every major Morgan operation had Rothschild backing. Every significant decision coordinated with the London and Paris houses. But the Rothschilds needed more than one family to control America. They cultivated the Rockefellers. John D. Rockefeller Sr. started by selling narcotics before moving into oil. The official histories call him a self-made man, a genius of industry. The hidden history reveals something different. The Rockefellers were Marrano Jews, and it was Rothschild capital that made the Rockefellers truly powerful. After acquiring initial capital through drug sales, John D. branched into oil. Standard Oil became the monopoly that crushed all competition. But the funding for this expansion came from Rothschild banks. The strategy came from Rothschild advisors. The ruthless efficiency came from understanding that the Rothschilds would protect their investment through political influence and legal manipulation. The Rothschilds also financed Edward Harriman in railroads and Andrew Carnegie in steel. Every major American industry had Rothschild capital behind it. They didn't need to be visible. They operated through agents, through foundations, through interlocking directorates, through secret partnerships that never appeared in public records. The Panic of 1907 was engineered specifically to create the crisis needed to establish a central bank. J.P. Morgan orchestrated the collapse of several banking houses. Panic spread. People lost their savings. Congressmen who had opposed central banking suddenly saw it as necessary to prevent future crises. The problem was created. The solution was waiting. In November of 1910, Senator Nelson Aldrich led a secret meeting on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. Present were representatives of the greatest banking houses of Wall Street and indirectly Europe. Frank Vanderlip from National City Bank, Henry Davison from J.P. Morgan Company, Paul Warburg, the Rothschild agent who had studied central banking in Europe, Charles Norton from First National Bank of New York, and others whose presence was hidden even from this already secret gathering. They traveled in a sealed railway car with blinds drawn. They used only first names during the entire stay to prevent servants from identifying them. The regular staff had been given vacation and replaced with screened substitutes who couldn't recognize the guests by sight. The secrecy was absolute, because what they were planning was the greatest financial coup in American history. For 9 days, they worked behind closed doors, drafting the blueprint for the Federal Reserve System. This wasn't banking reform to protect the public. This was a cartel agreement designed to maximize profits by eliminating competition, to obtain a franchise to create money from nothing for lending purposes, to control the reserves of all banks so reckless ones wouldn't be exposed to currency drains, to get taxpayers to pick up inevitable losses, and to convince Congress that the purpose was protecting the public. Paul Warburg did most of the technical drafting. His family bank in Germany had intimate connections to the Rothschilds. He understood European central banking because he had studied how the Rothschilds controlled the Bank of England and the Bank of France. He knew exactly what mechanisms were needed to give the same control over America. The plan had to avoid the name Central Bank. Americans were too suspicious. So Warburg chose the designation Federal Reserve System to deceive people into thinking it wasn't a central bank, but it would function exactly as a central bank, owned by private individuals who would profit from ownership of shares, controlling the nation's money and credit while appearing to be a government institution. The Federal Reserve Act passed in December 1913 during a late-night session when most congressmen who opposed it were away for Christmas. President Woodrow Wilson signed it, later regretting his decision but unable to reverse it. From that moment forward, control over American money shifted from the United States government to private banking interests dominated by the Rothschilds through their American agents. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York became the power center of the entire system. 5 banks controlled 53% of its stock. These 5 banks were controlled by Nathan M. Rothschild and Sons of London. Benjamin Strong, who had been part of the Jekyll Island Group, became the first governor of the New York Fed. He held secret meetings with heads of European central banks, particularly the Bank of England, coordinating policies that would culminate in the engineered crash of 1929. Control over the Federal Reserve was basically control over the world's money. That fact alone demonstrates the immensity of Rothschild power. The people appointed to head the Fed, to run it, to set policy, all had connections traceable back to the Rothschild network. This wasn't conspiracy theory. This was documented ownership structure and board relationships available in corporate records for anyone willing to dig through the layers of obfuscation. Another private enterprise using the federal name was Federal Express. Most people don't realize it's a private company. The Rothschilds understood the psychological power of that word. Federal implied government authority, public service, accountability to citizens. In reality, both the Federal Reserve and Federal Express answered only to their private owners and shareholders. The Rothschilds wielded power through multiple mechanisms. Money was primary, but intelligence services were equally important. British MI6 became a major vehicle for the satanic hierarchy, working behind the secret veil of Freemasonry to control world events. Lord Victor Rothschild worked for J.P. Morgan and Company and was an important part of MI5 British intelligence. He was also a communist and member of the Apostles' Club at Cambridge. This seems contradictory until you understand the Hegelian dialectic that the Rothschilds employed. Finance both sides, control communism and capitalism, create the conflict, manage the synthesis. Victor Rothschild could be simultaneously a banking heir, an intelligence operative, and a communist, because these weren't opposing positions. They were different tools for achieving the same ends. Lord Rothschild was one of the original members of Cecil Rhodes's Round Table Group, which developed into the Council on Foreign Relations. The Rothschilds had financed Cecil Rhodes from the beginning in Africa. The diamond monopoly through De Beers, the expansion of British Empire, the Rhodes Scholarship Program, designed to indoctrinate future leaders in globalist thinking. All Rothschild operations with Rhodes as the public face. The Council on Foreign Relations became the primary vehicle for Rothschild influence over American foreign policy. CFR members filled key positions in every presidential administration, regardless of party. Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, National Security Advisor, CIA Director. These positions rotated among CFR members who all understood the unwritten agenda: global governance, erosion of national sovereignty, integration of economies under centralized control. The Rockefellers served the Rothschilds well. John Foster Dulles, who married into the Rockefeller family, was chairman of the board of the Rockefeller Foundation and an important federal council of Churches of Christ official. His brother Allen Dulles ran the CIA and sat on multiple corporate boards. Both were CFR members. Both implemented policies that served Rothschild interests while appearing to serve American interests. Harry Emerson Fosdick, pastor of Rockefeller's Church, was among the presidents of the Rockefeller Foundation. Every road led back to the Rothschilds. The tentacles reached into every institution: the Jews, the Masons, the intelligence communities, the international bankers, the Prieurs de Sion, the Catholics, the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, the New Age movements, the cults, each connected back to Rothschild power. According to one well-researched estimate, the Rothschilds controlled half the wealth of the world by the mid-20th century. Half, not half the banking wealth, half of all wealth. Land, resources, corporations, currencies, precious metals, art, everything of value. This concentration of power in one family exceeded anything achieved by any empire in history. If the Rothschilds controlled only half the wealth, it indicated they needed allies to maintain global rulership. The Oppenheimer family appeared prominently as partners. A. Oppenheim was situated in Cologne. The Oppenheimers were early members of the Bavarian Illuminati. The Bund der Gerechten, League of the Just, was an Illuminati front-run, mainly by Jews who were Satanists. This organization, financed in part by the Rothschilds, paid Karl Marx to write the Communist Manifesto. Gumpel Oppenheim was in the inner circle of the Bund. His relative Heinrich Oppenheim masterminded the Communist Revolution of 1848 in Germany. The Communist Party's official histories accept the Bund as the predecessor of communism. The Oppenheimers remained close to the Rothschilds through subsequent generations. J. Robert Oppenheimer, father of the atomic bomb and CFR member, was exposed as a communist. This wasn't contradiction. This was the pattern. The Rothschilds' use of occult symbolism extended far beyond their coat of arms. They understood that symbols carry power, that repeated exposure programs the subconscious, that certain geometric forms channel energy according to ancient esoteric knowledge. The six-pointed star appeared everywhere they had influence, not because it was Jewish, because it was magical. Corporate logos began incorporating occult symbols as Rothschild financial control extended into American business. The pyramid with the all-seeing eye, Saturn symbolism, hidden sixes in designs, Masonic architecture in corporate headquarters. These weren't accidents. They were signatures, declarations of who really controlled these institutions. The Rothschilds' personal beliefs mixed Sabbatian Frankist Judaism with pure Satanism. Sabbatai Zevi was a 17th century Jewish mystic who claimed to be the Messiah and converted to Islam under pressure, telling his followers that sometimes the sacred must appear profane. His sect believed in redemption through sin, that deliberately violating every commandment would hasten the coming of their dark Messiah. Jacob Frank took these ideas further in the 18th century. Frankists practiced sexual rituals, engaged in wife-swapping, held black masses mocking Catholic ceremonies. Frank taught that the way to a new society led through the complete destruction of the old order, not reform, complete annihilation of existing structures. This ideology matched perfectly with the Rothschilds' approach to power. The connection between Satanism, evil, and money operates on three levels. First, money naturally attracts itself to evil. Prostitution pays well. Contract killing pays well. Virtue doesn't. If you maintain integrity, who compensates you for what you didn't do? Second, evil men believe where there's a will, there's a way, and they're willing to sell their souls for money. They employ evil to gain money without moral restraint. Third, and most important, the principal group of men who created international banking were Satanists from the beginning. These Satanists now run the Federal Reserve and control the creation of U.S. Federal Reserve notes. Having total control over the supply of paper money gives them leverage over world finances. They control the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank for International Settlements. Once they established financial control, they used their power to divide and conquer, to destroy both Christian and Muslim faith in God. These powerful bankers relate to faith in God as Cain related to Abel. They serve the opposing force. Their god is Lucifer, who they believe was unjustly cast down for bringing knowledge to humanity. They see themselves as Lucifer's agents on earth, liberating humanity from the tyranny of the Creator God. This isn't speculation. This is documented in their own writings, in leaked documents from their private gatherings, in testimony from those who have escaped their control. The Rothschilds took over all financial operations of the worldwide Catholic Church in 1823, according to researcher Eustace Mullins. Today, the banking and financial business of the Catholic Church is an extensive system interlocked with the Rothschilds and the rest of the international banking system. The great wealth of the Russian Tsars was entrusted to the Rothschilds. 35 million with the Rothschild Bank of England and 80 million in the Rothschild Paris Bank. The Rothschilds financed the Russian Revolution, which confiscated vast portions of the Orthodox Church's wealth. They prevented legitimate heirs of the Tsars from withdrawing a penny of the millions deposited in their banks. The Mountbattens related to the Rothschilds led court battles to prevent claimants from accessing the fortune. The money invested in the Russian Revolution was paid back directly by the Bolshevists in millions of dollars of gold. Plus, the Rothschilds grabbed the huge deposits of the Tsar's wealth. This amounts to what is now worth over $50 billion. Modern Rothschild operations are even more sophisticated than their historical manipulations. Peter Rupert. Lord Carrington, chairman of the Bilderberg Group, was the Rothschilds' director of their Rio Tinto Zinc Corporation. He also served as director of Barclays Bank and was part of the Trilateral Commission. François Mitterrand, who led France, was an extremely close friend of the Rothschilds. These connections demonstrate the extensive power the Rothschilds continue to wield behind the scenes. The Bilderberg Group, founded in 1954, serves as a primary vehicle for Rothschild coordination with other elite families. Annual meetings bring together heads of state, banking chiefs, corporate executives, media moguls, and intelligence directors. No minutes are published. No press is allowed. Participants are forbidden from discussing what occurs. Yet decisions made at Bilderberg gatherings often become policy within months. The Trilateral Commission, founded by David Rockefeller in 1973, serves similar purposes for coordinating policy between North America, Europe, and Japan. Zbigniew Brzezinski, its first director, later became National Security Advisor under Carter. The same people rotate through CFR, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg meetings, and government positions. They're not representatives of different interests. They're members of the same network, implementing the same agenda. In 1979, the Rothschilds established a highly unusual winery in Napa Valley, California, called Opus One. This wasn't a normal winery. The project began as a joint venture between Robert Mondavi and Baron Rothschild. The land was secretly purchased in the late 1960s. Construction began quietly using contractors from far away. Strangely, the Napa Valley Register, which reports on all building activity, remained extremely quiet about what was being built. From the air, the construction forms a Masonic square and compass. Inside, hidden stairwells and other concealed features were built in. The capstone of the pyramid has a rotunda where skylight penetrates and viewers can see the entire Napa Valley. The pyramid was constructed with limestone from Texas, no doubt with occult significance to that source location. The limestone itself contains fossils, which have been hidden from easy view. Opus One was originally scheduled to open around the summer solstice, but the date shifted to Wednesday, October 30th, 1991, the day before Halloween. Since opening, the Rothschilds have scheduled events around satanic high days. Those familiar with the occult understand these events are covers for rituals held secretly. The land has wrought iron gates locked at all times. Orchids, used by the Mothers of Darkness in their rituals, are grown all over the area. They're the only type of flower grown on the site. They're cared for by women dressed entirely in black, the standard garb of the Mothers of Darkness. The Mothers of Darkness are high-level Illuminati witches who conduct some of the most powerful rituals in the satanic hierarchy. Traditional wineries in California are open to the public. The opening ceremonies of Opus One were shrouded in secrecy. The announcement was low-key, and only select people and select international media were invited. This opening was extremely unusual for Napa Valley. Private guided tours are very hard to obtain of Opus One, in contrast to other area wineries. The estate is very protected and secluded. The wrought iron gates are always closed. Those who have managed to tour Opus One report seeing many occult and satanic items, yet large areas of the winery remain closed off even during private tours. The winery is not constructed remotely similar to any winery in the United States. This isn't about making wine. This is a temple, a place of ritual, a declaration of power hidden in plain sight. The Rothschilds have been intimately involved in witchcraft and the Illuminati since its early known history. Their practices aren't folk magic or Wiccan nature worship. This is high ceremonial magic, blood rituals, invocations of demonic entities, human sacrifice. The testimonies from escaped members are consistent and horrifying. Researchers who have interviewed escapees from Illuminati mind control programs describe Rothschild gatherings where children are ritually tortured and murdered, where participants consume blood and flesh, where the most depraved acts imaginable are performed as offerings to the forces they serve. These accounts are difficult to verify because victims are programmed with multiple personalities and subjected to such trauma that their testimony is easily discredited. But patterns emerge. Multiple witnesses from different countries, different decades, who have never met each other, describe identical rituals, identical locations, identical symbols. The probability of this being coincidental approaches zero. Something real is happening at the highest levels of power. Something that most people cannot process or accept. The Rothschild bloodline is maintained through carefully controlled breeding. Marriages are arranged. Genetic lines are tracked. Certain families are incorporated through marriage when they possess desired traits, wealth, or connections. But the core remains pure. The occult knowledge passes from generation to generation through initiations that begin in childhood. Children born into Illuminati families don't have normal childhoods. They undergo trauma-based mind control to create multiple personalities. Some personalities handle public life. Others handle business operations. Still others participate in rituals and maintain occult knowledge. The programming is sophisticated, using techniques developed over centuries and enhanced by modern psychology and neuroscience. The Rothschilds recruit from other families as well. Promising children from elite families are identified early. They're invited to special schools, given opportunities that seem like meritocracy, but are actually selection for the network. By the time they reach adulthood, they've been thoroughly assessed and either incorporated or discarded. Yale's Skull and Bone Society serves this function. 15 juniors are tapped annually. They undergo initiation rituals involving coffins, confessions, and rebirth symbolism. They receive significant financial gifts. They're introduced to the network of patriarchs who will advance their careers if they prove loyal and useful. The Russell family that founded Skull and Bones was intimately connected to the Rothschilds through banking and the opium trade. The Bush family provides a perfect example of how the system works. Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush were all Skull and Bones members. 3 generations of the same family initiated into the same secret society. Prescott Bush's banking house helped finance Nazi Germany. George H.W. Bush ran the CIA and became president. George W. Bush also became president. This isn't coincidence or merit. This is the system functioning as designed. The same pattern repeats with the Bundy family, the Harriman family, the Taft family. These American elite families intermarried and coordinated their power through secret societies that ultimately answer to the same Illuminati hierarchy controlled by families like the Rothschilds. The network is vast, but the controlling core is small. Modern financial control operates through institutions like BlackRock and Vanguard. These investment firms hold majority stakes in virtually every major corporation. BlackRock alone manages assets exceeding $10 trillion. Vanguard's assets exceed $7 trillion. Together, they own significant shares of each other and of every company that matters. Banks, tech firms, pharmaceutical companies, defense contractors, media conglomerates, food producers. The ownership structure appears complex, but ultimately traces back to the same elite families. The Rothschilds don't need to have their name on everything anymore. They operate through layers of foundations, trusts, holding companies, and nominees. But the control remains. The coordination remains. The agenda remains. That agenda is the establishment of a global government with centralized control over all resources, all populations, all information. National sovereignty is being systematically dismantled. Borders are being erased. Cultures are being homogenized. Independent thought is being suppressed. All in the name of solving manufactured crises. Climate change, pandemics, terrorism, financial instability. Each crisis demands more centralized control. Each solution involves less freedom. The Rothschilds think in terms of centuries. They don't need to accomplish everything in one generation. They plant seeds that will bear fruit for their descendants. They corrupt institutions slowly, so resistance doesn't coalesce. They use Hegelian dialectic to manage opposition, fund both sides, control the outcome, synthesize the predetermined solution. This is why political theater seems increasingly absurd. Left and right, Democrat and Republican, conservative and liberal. These divisions are largely artificial at the elite level. The same banking interests fund all major candidates. The same corporations donate to both parties. The same foreign policy continues regardless of who wins elections. Because the people making real decisions aren't elected. They're appointed or they inherit their positions in the power structure. The Rothschild philosophy, articulated by Meyer Amschel himself, is simple. Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws. This principle has proven true across centuries. Laws can be changed, politicians can be replaced, but whoever controls the money supply controls everything else. They can inflate or deflate. They can create booms or cause depressions. They can reward allies and punish enemies. They are, in effect, more powerful than governments. Modern economists won't teach you this. They'll talk about complex theories of monetary policy, about independent central banks, about market forces. But these are obfuscations. The reality is much simpler. Private banks create money from nothing, loan it at interest to governments and individuals, and when loans can't be repaid, they seize real assets. This is the greatest scam in human history, and the Rothschilds perfected it. The philosophical question this raises is profound. Is there actual free will in a system where money itself is controlled by a tiny elite practicing satanic rituals and coordinating policy across centuries? Can democracy function when the money supply is private property? Can justice exist when the legal system depends on funding from those it supposedly regulates? These questions make most people uncomfortable. It's easier to believe in the official narratives, that we live in free societies with market economies and democratic governance, that success comes from hard work and talent, that the system, while imperfect, is basically fair. Accepting the reality of coordinated elite control requires rethinking everything. It means recognizing that much of what we've been taught is deliberate deception. The evidence is available for anyone willing to look. Corporate documents showing interlocking directorates, historical records of secret meetings, membership lists of exclusive organizations, leaked emails revealing coordination, symbols in plain sight broadcasting allegiance. The Rothschilds don't hide as much as they once did, because they've reached a point where exposure doesn't threaten them. What can the average person do against such power? This is the question that paralyzes resistance. The Rothschilds and their network control the money, the media, the military, the intelligence agencies, the corporations, the foundations. They have the resources to destroy anyone who seriously threatens them. They've been building this system for 250 years. How can ordinary people challenge it? The answer is consciousness. The first step is seeing the system clearly, not through the lens of left versus right or any other controlled binary, but as a structure of power that transcends these divisions. The second step is refusing to give consent. Stop participating in systems that feed the beast. Build parallel structures. Create alternative networks. Support truly independent voices and platforms. The Rothschilds derive power from our compliance, from our use of their money, from our consumption of their media, from our participation in their institutions. Every time we deposit money in their banks, invest in their markets, watch their programming, we strengthen the system. Withdrawal of consent, even partial, creates cracks in the foundation. This isn't a call to violence. The Rothschilds would love an excuse to crack down, to impose martial law, to accelerate their agenda under the guise of protecting public safety. This is a call to awareness and to strategic non-compliance, to building alternatives, to supporting each other outside their systems, to remembering that their power ultimately depends on our cooperation. The Rothschild bloodline has accumulated unimaginable wealth and power over 2.5 centuries. They've done it through banking, through secret societies, through occult practices, through patient long-term planning, and through utter ruthlessness toward anyone who stood in their way. They believe they're destined to rule, that their satanic master has granted them authority over this world. But nothing is permanent. Every empire falls eventually. Every dynasty ends. The Rothschilds understand this, which is why they work so hard to maintain control, to suppress opposition, to manage perception. They know that if enough people understood the true nature of the system, if enough people withdrew consent, their power would evaporate. The future is not written. The outcome is not predetermined. We are not powerless unless we choose to be. The first step is knowledge. You now know more than most people about who really holds power and how they obtained it. The question is what you'll do with that knowledge. Will you dismiss it as conspiracy theory and return to comfortable illusions? Or will you start asking harder questions, looking deeper, connecting dots that the media tells you don't connect? Will you share what you've learned with others, despite the social cost? Will you start making different choices about where you spend your money, your time, your attention? The Rothschilds bet on human nature, on complacency, on the desire for easy answers and comfortable lies, on the fear of being labeled crazy or anti-Semitic or conspiracy theorist. They've designed a system where telling the truth about them is socially punished, where even asking questions is considered evidence of mental instability. But truth has a power that transcends their manipulations. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you understand how the system really works, you can't pretend anymore. And once enough people wake up to the reality of coordinated elite control, the illusion becomes impossible to maintain. The Rothschild bloodline represents something larger than one family. They're the visible tip of a power structure that has enslaved humanity for millennia under different names and forms. Mystery Babylon, the Black Nobility, the Illuminati. The names change, but the system continues. A small group convinced of their right to rule over the many. A network bound by blood, by oaths, by ritual, by shared secrets too dark to speak. Breaking this system requires more than political action or economic reform. It requires spiritual awakening, recognition that the battle isn't ultimately about money or power in the conventional sense. It's about consciousness, about whether humanity will remain asleep, managed like livestock, or wake up to our true nature and potential. The Rothschilds fear this awakening more than anything. It's why they invest so heavily in controlling education, media, entertainment. Why they push materialism, nihilism, division. Why they work to destroy families, communities, traditions. Anything that might give people strength, purpose, unity outside their control must be undermined. But they can't control everything. They can't stop person-to-person communication. They can't prevent people from thinking. They can't suppress truth indefinitely. Every tyranny in history eventually fell because the truth found a way through. The Rothschild system will be no different. Research for yourself. Don't just believe what you've read here. Verify the documents, check the sources, follow the money, connect the dots. The evidence is there for anyone willing to look. The Rothschilds are powerful, but they're not invisible. Their networks are extensive, but they're traceable. Their symbols are everywhere once you know what you're looking at. Share what you learn, but be strategic. The system has defense mechanisms. People who speak too loudly about these topics often face consequences: professional ruin, social ostracism, sometimes worse. But there's strength in numbers. As more people wake up, it becomes harder to suppress the truth. The narrative starts to crack. The illusion begins to fail. The Rothschild bloodline built their empire on secrecy, on hidden knowledge, on the manipulation of perception. The antidote is transparency, shared information, and collective awakening. They win if we stay isolated, confused, and compliant. We win if we see clearly, communicate truthfully, and coordinate resistance. This is the challenge of our time. Not left versus right, not this nation versus that nation, but humanity versus a parasitic elite that has fed on us for centuries. The Rothschilds and their network are formidable opponents, but they're not invincible. Their power depends on our ignorance and compliance. Remove those factors, and their system collapses. The question isn't whether change is possible. History proves that every seemingly permanent power structure eventually falls. The question is whether change will happen in our lifetime, and whether we'll participate in bringing it about, or remain passive observers, hoping someone else takes the risk. The Rothschilds made their choice 250 years ago. They chose power over principle, wealth over humanity, Satan over God. They've lived with the consequences of that choice, amassing everything the world offers while losing their souls in the process. Now you must make your choice: comfort or truth, compliance or resistance, sleep or awakening. Choose wisely. The future depends on it.